Hello, everybody. How are you guys today? Welcome. I hope everybody's having an amazing start to their day. I guess it's sort of like midway through the day at this point. Hello, Namaste. Hello, Jake. Hello, Halima. Yes, it's totally okay to post a question early. The one thing you do want to be aware of is that after 30 minutes, if you come in more than 30 minutes early, it does auto-delete some of the questions. So check in with that for sure. But you're more than welcome to. And just because then sometimes you come in and then you post your question early and then I don't actually get a chance to go to it. But you are right on time, it looks like. Hello to Rochelle. Hello to Oslam. How are you? Oh, wow. That's so exciting, Oslam. I'm going to read that out loud in a little bit, but I just saw the gist of it right now. That's very exciting. Hello, Callisto. How are you today? Hello, Gabriella and Natalie and Merlin. So nice to see you guys. Okay, so today I'm going to make a few announcements. And if you haven't yet, please print off your Advanced Anxious Attachment Style workbook, or you can have it out, like up on your computer screen. In order to use it on your computer, you just have to download. So for all of the versions, we are having a fillable version now available. I think it's for almost all the courses. We're still going through and doing like this big audit and update of all the workbooks and all these different things, but they should almost all be fillable. And so how to make them fillable, literally click download. Sometimes if you don't click download, it looks like the funny version of the workbook. So just keep that in mind. We will go through, I've been doing a lot, as most of you guys know who have been in here, I've been doing a lot of the Advanced Anxious Attachment Style course workbooks. And so we will go through it at a little more of a quick pace. The first couple of exercises, because it's, for each and every one, we talk about some of the characteristics of each of the phases, how to tell which phase you are currently in, or if you're single and you're doing this work, how you can reflect on the patterns in terms of which stage you tend to get stuck on and what you can do to overcome that. So I won't go through all of those patterns again because it might be a little bit repetitive, but we'll go through the exercises at a high level. And then when it comes to specifically the anxious characteristics, as you'll see throughout this course, we're going to do a deep dive into some of where patterns come from, why they show up the way that they do, and what we can start to do to reprogram them. I will make a couple of really quick announcements. We are opening more group events, more socials, more guided morning and evening routines, and more just mastermind type connection groups as well. I will be poking my head in there for some of them, and I know a lot of you have been like, they're all booked up. They got really booked up really quickly. We've had a lot of really amazing feedback about them, so looking forward to that. We're going to be finalizing dates on Monday, and you should see some more dates opening by Tuesday of next week, actually in the members lounge area. So if you haven't joined in for one of those yet, make sure that you do. It's a really nice way of connecting. I know for most of you right now, and I'm happy, I'd like to maybe almost do a webinar going into next month to chat about this more with our whole community here. But I know a lot of people are back under lockdown right now. I know myself, my area that I live in is just about to get locked back down completely. I know a lot of people are going through that, and, some of us are really lucky and, we work from home or we have people that we live with or care for, but then some people are isolated more and are living by themselves and things like this. So that's part of why we're doing all this community stuff, is to help offset some of that. So if you're in a position or a dynamic where, you do feel isolated, please. And, one of the principles we know is that often when we feel isolated as human beings, we tend to then feel socially insecure. And then sometimes as a coping mechanism, we're actually more likely to then go on to isolate ourselves further. And please, be mindful and try to break that cycle so that you can go, you know what, I'm going to get in one of those social groups. I'm going to join a video call. I'm going to try to be vulnerable in that. I'm going to open up more, do for yourself whatever you can to try to offset some of that, because it will be a bit of a challenging time, I think, for many people. So Keep that in mind. That's why we have that support there. And if there's anything you guys need from me that would help you guys to feel more supported, or if you have any good ideas you want to share in terms of that, at any point in time, you can email info@personaldevelopmentschool.com. And my team gathers all the information from there, the feedback. We go through a weekly meeting about it. So I will know that information will reach me. And we're here to really support you guys during this time. So I hope you know that. And then also we're in the 90-day challenge, and a lot of people have been showing up so well for that. So great job, everybody. Don't put pressure on yourselves. And the last thing I want to address is that a lot of feedback we've had recently is that there's too much content coming out too quickly. So I'm going to put a little video together. We will have an announcement board up the first week of December, and I'll put a little video in there each week, just as a reminder. But I do want to have a regular reminder just to let you know that there is no rush, okay? It's all you want to do is follow your course guide for your attachment style, pick specific areas of your life you want to work on, and work at your own pace. This isn't a race. This isn't a competition. There's nothing here to put pressure on yourself around. Show up, be consistent. This is all for you. You're here to work on yourself. You're not here to please anybody. You're here for this to be your journey of healing and growth. And so take your time. I'm going to put video reminders that say that to provide that extra support. And then we might do one, maybe we'll go down to one course a month instead of two if that's really a pain point and feeling pressuring for people. And we're also going to organize the webinar library into sections, so you don't go in and be like, oh my gosh, there's so many webinars to watch from the past. We'll put the Q&As in one section. We're going to just do some updates to make it a little more clear that way, and so that nobody's taking on I have to come into the school and complete every course and watch every webinar there ever was. And just a gentle reminder to be consistent, show up for yourself, but not to put pressure on yourself, okay? So with all of that being said, I'll answer the first 2-3 questions like I normally do, and then we'll dive into some of the exercises. And we'll really try to get further into this for the anxious preoccupied by focusing in on some of the the beginning. We'll talk through things at a higher level, and then we'll do some deep dives into the expectation components for anxious preoccupied and the different phases and the protest behaviors. And we're going to put a big emphasis and focus on that here in this webinar today. So Rochelle, nice to see you guys first and foremost. And Rochelle says, what is the best way to communicate with an AA when you need to tell them about their mistakes without sounding critical? My sister is an AA or an FA leaning AA. I am not sure. She has the habit of becoming very argumentative or starts placing too many demands on any person who tries to meet her needs and is nice to her, but at the same time she becomes very people-pleasing around people who do not value her that much. She had gone through a nasty breakup in the past where her partner had cheated on her and was toxic in the relationship. But I do believe that she had made mistakes too by being very argumentative or demanding when he tried to meet her needs. But when he used to pull away, she used to start people-pleasing. She was obviously devastated by the breakup. Yeah, she sounds FA. Had suicidal ideation and is now in therapy for it. That's good. Although she is better now, we have observed that she falls into the pattern of being argumentative with people who value her while people-pleasing others. That's kind of an FA thing. It's the deactivation and then the activation. So she's probably leaning anxious, but she obviously has that deactivated side. We try to tell her not to do this, but she says, are you saying this is all my fault, and gets defensive? How do we effectively communicate with her? Great question. Okay. So first and foremost, I want to highlight that it's not your responsibility. Hopefully that's work she can learn from therapy and do some of this work on herself. But you are more than welcome to still have an honest conversation, especially if you feel like you're drawn to doing that, if you think that it'll potentially benefit the dynamic. And you can refer to some of the communication scripts for things like this, but specifically if you're dealing with this, what I would start by saying is, hey, I want to share something with you, and I specifically want to share this with you because I care and because I value you and I want the best for you. So you can kind of preface it by being like, hey, I love you, I care for you. The prefacing works well with FAs and AAs. It doesn't work very well with DAs, so keep that in mind. And then you can open up and say, I notice sometimes you have this dynamic where, and you can make it even more impersonal and say, hey, I think I might notice a pattern where X, Y, and Z. And honestly, what I would then go to do in your next piece is then I would say, I notice I have my own patterns that are challenging or that are imperfect, and I would hope you could share them with me. But I think that, in this situation, sometimes you can become critical with people who are really trying hard. And sometimes that might push people away. And I wonder, like, if that is true, or if that does show up for you in any form, where might that be coming from? Like, are you afraid of receiving love? Are you afraid of receiving connection? Do you have expectations of people that might be too high? I think we all have our imperfections, and I'm doing work on myself, and I notice that in you, and you're more than welcome to share things back with me. This works well for FAs and AAs because they feel, when you're impersonal about it and you're saying, I care about you, I'm doing this to share with you, they often feel seen and heard and understood and bonded. You would use a different approach for a dismissive avoidant, just to double clarify. But positioning things in that form would be the best thing. And then if she turns around, I think if you do it that way, there's a very small chance that this happens. But if she turns around and seems to be critical, you can turn around and say, hey, I totally understand you might be taking this as criticism. I think you're amazing in so many different ways. I think you show up so well here, here, and here, and maybe have like a couple ideas in your back pocket to share so that you can say these things. And I just want to remind you, the only reason I'm bringing this up is because I think it might be a pattern that's hurting you in some way, and I don't want you to go through that. And for the record, I am absolutely not saying that this is all your fault. Your ex-husband should have never cheated, and that was a horrible thing for you to be put through, and I'm not saying anything related to that. I'm just saying it's beneficial to notice like what our part might be, so that there's no part of us that's in that dynamic again, or so we can minimize our chances of things like that happening. And not necessarily with her husband, but if it's about her being critical with a friend or a different family member or something like that, that's how I bring that up. So great question, and thank you for sharing. And Namaste says, would it be safe to expect that on average men are usually DA? Therefore, any type of anxious will know to just expect that in dating. Okay, great question. There's some nuanced layers in here. Layer number one, according to a lot of research that has been done, although this was, I believe, the most recent big study on this, I think it was like a large Gallup poll, I think it was almost 20 years ago. But according to a lot of research, I believe it's 51% of people are supposedly secure. Now, there are major flaws in self-reporting, right? Like when it comes to reporting our own patterns, and especially if that self-reporting is your average person self-reporting about something that they haven't already been educated on in regards to the patterns. Now, what I've observed, and obviously I have a specific sample size of the population that is, working on themselves and wanting to heal and coming to places to, whether it's a workshop or whether it's a school or whether it's client sessions that I've done for a long time. Obviously, there's a sample size of the population there that has healing to do. But beyond that, from what I've observed, is I do believe a lot of people who are actually dismissive avoidant, if they're not extremely dismissive avoidant, will often self-report as secure. I think a portion of people who are slightly anxious, I've seen a lot of people over the years be like, oh, I'm secure with just a little bit of anxiousness from time to time. And then when I really look and get to know the person, I'm like, oh no, this person's really anxious. So I think that there's different dynamics where self-reporting can be quite flawed, again, especially when we haven't been educated about attachment theory and what patterns are and all these different things, and we're just answering some questions. So I would argue that it's probably not a fair measure of how many people are secure. But I would go on to say on layer 2 here that yes, more men on average are going to be dismissive and more women on average are going to be anxious. Now, it might sound like I'm stereotyping, but it's definitely a big pattern. And the reason why is because we're naturally going to, at least historically, this might be changing a little bit more now, But historically, for anybody who's an adult at this time, you probably grew up, and if you were a male, you probably had more emotional shaming, right? Don't be a crybaby. It's weak to express emotion. It's weak to share vulnerability. Don't be this, don't be that. And, historically, we have men being more emotionally shamed, and we have women more being body shamed. And this is why we largely see, and this isn't my idea, this is actually something I listened to in a really beautiful talk by Glennon Doyle Melton. And I was like, this is very true. And she says that, men are more emotionally shamed, women are more body shamed. And this is why we often have women trying to love more through emotion, because that's their safe space. And we often have men trying to love more and get connection through the body, right? Often men are like more sexually driven, again, as a general rule. And of course, there's other components like more testosterone and things like this. But this is also part of our patterned and societal conditioning for what's safe and where we're safe to express ourselves and share ourselves. And women are, they share their emotions and get to talk more and have more of that. And men are often in their upbringing, put on a pedestal for sex, if they're having a lot of sex, or if they're connecting with all these women, or if they're getting attention in that way. And so we have these really interesting dynamics, and this will play a certain role or a certain degree of a role when it comes to attachment styles. And of course, individuals who are less emotionally shamed and feel safer to express emotionally and bond emotionally with people and really value that are going to tend to be a little bit more anxious. I would say FA really goes both ways, and that's a sort of separate tertiary factor. And that has a lot more to do with upbringing and childhood and how much trauma you are exposed to as a general rule. So it's a really great question. But I would still not say, no, to say that men are usually DA. I would say men can be all different attachment styles. Again, this is on percentage, right? This is sort of like based on percentages, not like there's still going to be hundreds of thousands of men, that's in, your country or whatever it might be, that are anxious. And there's going to be tons and tons of men who are fearful avoidant and who are also secure. So you might see polarities in terms of men and women as a general rule in one form, but I definitely wouldn't go through life operating under the assumption that men are, if it's a man, it's probably going to be a dismissive avoidant attachment style person, because that will definitely throw you off. What I would do if you're looking and you're wondering is I would look for some of the patterns of behaviors you see that are connected or related to each of the attachment styles. So for example, if somebody's more slow to warm up, if somebody's more guarded, if somebody doesn't express too much about their emotion, if they don't like to move too quickly, okay, then you're probably going to be in that avoidant category, either dismissive avoidant or FA with a strong dismissive side. If somebody is really quick moving, really emotionally available, open, sort of hungering for more connection, communicating really frequently, okay, that person's giving me patterns if they're more anxious. So I would focus more on the patterns than anything else when it comes to determining that question, but it's a really wonderful question. Okay, so Oslam says, Taish, just want to say thank you. I'm freshly in a long distance relationship and so happy. I have moments of deactivating and activating, but always going back to the tools in your videos, and so much tools in your videos, and so much progress in vulnerability, asking for my needs to be met and setting up boundaries. Very difficult at times, but so happy and feel blessed after doing it. Thank you. That is amazing. Congratulations. That's your work. That's you showing up and doing all of that. So congratulations to you. It's very, very exciting. And I'm so happy to hear that. And it's interesting, I was having a conversation recently and we were talking about how, as a fearful avoidant, it's easy to go, activating and deactivating. And then we really want to stay in the middle. That's where that security is, where it's like we care, we value, but we're not coming from an overactivated space, or we're not pushing somebody away out of fears or stories or things like that. And part of like staying in that secure space I was sharing with this person is about noticing if you're overly activated and being like, hold on, let me have a more realistic perspective. Let me look at the potential downsides, not in a diminishing way, but just in a, let me look at the reality of the situation kind of way. And then if I end up being in a very deactivated place, okay, that means I have to work on my stories. That means I have to communicate needs, maybe have a tough conversation, to always come back into center point. And that should be a really big focus. So it sounds like you already know all of that based on what you said. So what an inspiration for everybody else. And thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I'm going to answer Gabriella and Jake's question, and then I'm going to dive right into some of the workbook exercises. So Gabriella says, hi, I'm struggling with black and white thinking regarding people all good or all bad, flipping between the two. I noticed this came up in therapy, and it's only around cluster B personality disorders that I have a strong bond with, i.e. parents or a relationship partner. Otherwise, I see other people as they are good and bad together. People I have a strong bond with. Okay. Is this black and white thinking based on a survival strategy? And how can I start to overcome my fixation with cluster B, NPD, BPD people? I feel anxious, an anxious attachment towards them, and a need to be loved by them, impossible, obviously. Okay, so really great question. Really great awareness as well. I know you're working so hard, so you're doing a great job. Okay, a couple things. This is largely going to be probably because of your relationship. Okay, so I want you to imagine this. You grew up, as you've shared, and thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing this. You grew up with a parent who was probably BPD, if not NPD, but it sounds more like BPD type patterns, okay? So individuals with BPD do something called splitting a lot. And it's this idea that they are always in polarities with everybody. Okay, so they are all, and we say always, largely in polarities. They are, putting people on huge pedestals, or they're really diminishing people and resenting people. And in fact, they can really swing profoundly back and forth with that same person over a fairly short period of time. But these are in extremes. So I want you to imagine you grow up and you're exposed to this regularly. Then it's going to make a lot of sense that anybody who reminds you of your mother, because you saw her operating in that context, you have the experience of these people being like that with you. Okay, so now they're like that with you. These people are all, or your experience of this person that you're going to project back out onto this type of personality is always in the extremes, because that's how that person was operating. So you're part of your subconscious associations for what love was with her, your dynamics, the ways you learn to relate to her are going to be in those polarities. Now, it's a really good sign that you don't at all see that for everybody, but it's very normal for you to have the experience of seeing other individuals like her who trigger subconscious associations that remind you of her and what your subconscious comfort zone with love was around her. It's going to make a lot of sense that you have some of that same dynamic play out relative to those types of individuals, because that's what you were exposed to, and that's going to be what was patterned into you for a long period of time. So the awareness is huge, and that's absolutely fantastic. And I wouldn't say that it's not possible for the person to love. I would say until they heal, it's not very likely, if not potentially impossible, for that person to love in a consistently healthy way. So it doesn't mean that, your mother didn't love you or anything like that. I'm sure there was a tremendous amount of love there, maybe suffocating at times, but in a way that was filtered through a lot of unhealthy programming. And so it sort of gets tainted in a way with these unhealthy nuances as it comes out and as you're given some of that love. And of course, you, as a child of that individual, you're going to receive some of that splitting at the same time. So what do you do when you are in that dynamic? What you want to do is, I want you to imagine this, okay? Part of when you say, how do I overcome my fixation with cluster B people? Well, here's what I want you to notice. The reason that fixation occurs is because you got imprinted profoundly with so much intermittent reinforcement. intermittent reinforcement can be very addictive. This is what gamblers get addicted to. It's like the intermittent reinforcement of the slot machine. So one day you get lots of love for your mother, it goes really well. Other days it's unpredictable. And when you have that withdrawing of something that you've got all these positive subconscious programmed associations to, well, now it's going to be really painful. So now your brain registers and is imprinted by lots of pain with not receiving love from that person, which means you're already going to be very motivated to try to get that love. And on top of that, you've got the twofold part of that, which is, and you've associated lots of pleasure with getting that love. So you have imprint after imprint after imprint, probably hundreds of thousands of times during your upbringing, or at least thousands upon thousands of times, of basically getting imprinted to be addicted to intermittent reinforcement, especially around people who remind you of your mother, because it's going to trigger all of those imprints. And that's where that fixation is coming from, right? It makes a lot of sense when you look at it. And so the next piece that you want to do is you want to start breaking down that intermittent reinforcement by rebalancing those associations. So when you feel yourself activating, you want to imprint yourself consistently to remind yourself, what is the pain that comes out of this when I'm activated? And it's going to take time because you're going to have to be equilibrating multiple imprints. But this is absolutely possible to do. And if you're consistent about it, it only takes so long to really make new programs. So every time you feel activated, I want you to look at the downsides of being activated and what this comes with. And I want you to think, honestly, of like challenging times you had with your mother, challenging times you've had with past people who are cluster B, and what the downsides are of being activated towards them. Think of like a gambler trying to break their gambling addiction. Yeah, you get the high of like the win every so often, but what about all the pain of like when you lose, when you're running out of money, when you're afraid you can't pay your bills? Like, so you're trying to reprogram these components by creating new associations that balance out the original ones that are there. Okay, so you're going to do that on one side, and then you're going to think of the pleasure of having a healthy, stable relationship, what that would look like, what that would feel like, and envisioning what that is. And doing a lot of visualization work would be really powerful for this in terms of a healthy relationship, a secure relationship, somebody who shows up, somebody who you can share your feelings with, who's trustworthy, who's consistent, who's in a healed place. And you want to think and feel about that a lot. So you're basically trying to rebalance this original imbalance of imprints that are creating a fixation that's not going to serve the highest expression of yourself or your healing. So I hope that makes a lot of sense. It's a really excellent question. And this, a variation of this can be used for anybody who's trying to get over a breakup where they're feeling really connected to somebody from the past, but they know it's not the right person and they know it's not the right dynamic or situation. So great question. Okay, so Natalie, quick share. Today I wrote a letter. How are you, Natalie? As if it was addressed to my abuser to help me release repressed feelings about my assault. It was so emotional and draining, but it feels so good to work through these feelings. I burned the letter at the end to symbolize the feelings no longer having a hold over me. Thanks for helping me to open up, Thais. That is so beautiful. Good for you. And I'm so proud to see that you're showing up and literally you're there doing that emotional work to be with yourself, be present with your feelings, connect in that relationship to yourself, honor your feelings, and then release some of this. And so release all of it as much as you can. So that is very powerful and really incredible. And thank you for sharing that with everybody. Very inspiring. Okay, so Jake says, hey, Thais, in the second lesson, you discussed the empowerment lesson and how it is that these things tend to get magnified in a relationship. How is it that you consciously recognize what is being amplified? Is there a way to figure these things out prior to getting in a relationship? How do you determine if someone is right for you? Often I'll go through several dates to determine whether I really feel someone is a match. How long is it that you need to give this stage? A while. Are you talking about the dating stage of a relationship? In the second lesson, so in the second lesson I have out here, we are the second exercise, I think you mean? In the dating phase, yeah, about getting really clear about what you want in a relationship, personal empowerment through like understanding who you are, what your needs are in a relationship, all these different things. What the goal of that is to have that out ahead of time and like all written on paper and clear as much as you can. But the dating phase of a relationship, I want you guys to think of as like the vetting phase of a relationship. And what this means is that this can take 3 months, 4 months, 5 months to really understand. You're definitely not supposed to like have an idea of somebody, get clear about what you want and what your non-negotiables are and what you value. And then by the end of the first date, no, it's going to take time. So you're absolutely on the right track there. And it's important to give yourself and the relationship dynamic that time. Because if you don't, then what's often going to happen is you're going to fall in love with or be infatuated with the idea of a person more than the person themselves, because the reality of all dating dynamics is that it takes time to get to know somebody. It takes time to get to understand their wounds, their programming, what they value, what their needs are, all of these different dynamics. So that is a great question. And clarity can help, intentionality can help ahead of time, set the stage, make sure that you're not going in on autopilot. But there will be a discovery phase involved, and that's part of what dating is supposed to be for. So great question. Okay, so I'm going to start with, hello, Magni. Wow. I'm just going to read this really quick because it's very exciting. Magni says, hi, Thais. I tested only 8% AA the other day. So I'm basically done being AA. I now test 50% secure. I tested 25% FA and feel it might come from my pain and trust issues from my relationship. That's still a bit undefined. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. But the surprise is I test 17% DA. Are these results normal on the way to healing for an AA? Yes. This comes up so often. These are all great signs. Often when we're self-reporting, whenever we are in a state where we are out of homeostasis in the relationship to ourselves, and then we realize that we have one, what can often take place is because the brain's so trying to equilibrate and so designed to do so, we can get into a dynamic where we go, oh my goodness, I have a relationship to myself. I have to guard it. I have to protect it. I have to show up for it. And we can become very focused in on that. And so we can want to create a little bit more space and distance from other people. And so that's a natural part of having homeostasis or a homeostatic impulse and trying to achieve that homeostasis when we've been out of relationship to ourselves for so long. So it's normal to feel like you're becoming more dismissive and to actually become a little bit more dismissive, but for the right reasons. A, you're kind of breaking that codependency away. And B, you're probably just going into self-protection mode around your own self-soothing as you're trying to nurture. If you imagine like a little sapling growing, you're trying to nurture it, you're trying to protect it, you're trying to care for it. It's the relationship to yourself that's budding. And so you might find that, okay, I'm showing up a little bit DA. That will go away as you get more into equilibration. You don't even have to do anything about it. I wouldn't even take a dismissive avoidant course. Those behaviors are just compensatory, compensation behaviors. If that's not the right word, but they're there to compensate you for being out of relationship to yourself for so long. And there's nothing to really work on there. I would work on congratulations, amazing. And I remember when you started and you were definitely very strongly AA. So that's a huge, huge accomplishment and you should be so proud. But I would definitely work on some of the trust wounds that might have come out of some of the dynamic that you've been in where there's a lack of feeling like it's defined, because those are probably actually more recent imprints because of some of the challenges you went through. I would do the work on that. I would do like the overcoming jealousy and repairing trust course, and I would work on repairing your trust baseline. And you'll see some of those FA behaviors tend to fall away a little bit. And I would even do like a little bit of the advanced FA courses, just to make sure that none of that, just to take care of those imprints early on, if that makes sense. So great question, and that's a beautiful share. Really happy for you. Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's dive into the first exercises here. So if you haven't already, make sure that you have your workbook up so you can see it, have your notebook out, or whatever you use to do all the courses, or of course the printable version up now as well. So the first exercise, and we do this with all the advanced attachment style courses, it's very important. It's just laying out the phases. And what I want you to do and use this for is as I go throughout the course, I talk about the different phases, and I talk in each of the phases what the rites of passage are, what the patterns are, what we really need to learn and figure out and achieve in that stage, in a sense, in order to move into the next stage of the relationship life cycle. And so what you can do with this is sort of like a journaling space, is to familiarize yourself with each of the stages, the different patterns, the rites of passage, so you can identify either what you're currently in a relationship now, or where you've historically become stuck in your relationships. And so maybe you go, oh, the power struggle phase was always a big one for me. That's where my relationships would always end. Or, you know what? The stability stage is where relationships would end for me. And that's a big common one for fearful avoidance, because unless, and this is so interesting because it's a huge theme. This is actually a big common one for anxious, preoccupied relationships to end as well. And part of it can be if so much of your subconscious comfort zone is based on chaos or the roller coaster or drama, and then you start moving through things and knocking things off in a way, like having the conversations about wounds, opening up, expressing your needs, all these different things, then you can do all this healing and have this really deep bond. But then sometimes your subconscious mind can go, wait, this isn't what love is. And it can actually sabotage, in a way, this dynamic that's actually something turning very healthy, if your subconscious comfort zone isn't used to having healthy interpersonal romantic dynamics, and then goes, oh, this is boring now, or oh, there isn't the roller coaster, this must not be the right relationship. And so part of our actual healing, if we get to that point, also becomes learning to appreciate the harmony and peace, learning to accept it, learning to, reprogram with ourselves that we deserve it, we're worthy of it. It's important to have this. This is a healthy thing, and actually changing some of the programs within us that have a subconscious comfort zone around chaos. And so this is really important for both FAs and AAs to recognize, and more than anybody, FAs who lean AA. Okay, so the idea here is to get clear in where your patterns are, what stages you get stuck in, why, and to know some of the rites of passage you're going to use throughout the course of this course to do the reprogramming work. Okay, so that's exercise 1. And it goes on to ask you just to get clear about, where your patterns are, what you want to work on, as question 1 on page 3. And then what are the rites of passage necessary for you to progress to the next stage, dependent on where you get stuck. So whether you are in a relationship now and you find yourself in the dating phase and not in the honeymoon phase yet, and maybe you're like, okay, these are the rites of passage, this is what I have to figure out, I have to ask these questions, I have to build this foundation, so on and so forth. Or maybe you find, I'm in the stability phase, I have to start striking up some of these commitment conversations, I have to start having healthy habits and routines to move things along. Basically the idea is to get clear there, or to reflect on past patterns and go, what could I have done? What rites of passage did I need to have? Not because you're looking back and trying to regret your past relationships, but because you're trying to have the capacity to practice observing your patterns and noticing them, so that you are enabled in future relationship dynamics to have the tools, have the awarenesses, and then they're significantly easier to apply. Okay? And then you can think of or look at, what can I communicate better? What strategies would I want to express or ask for to be used? What expectations could we discuss so that they become healthy needs or standards instead of these subconscious projections we're putting on people and then we're upset when they don't work out? And how will you communicate these things better? And again, this can be reflection if you're single. And then what do I need to become in order to progress? Okay, so maybe you decide as an anxious, preoccupied person, oh my gosh, I historically get stuck in stage X because I'm not setting boundaries. I'm not speaking up. I'm not sharing myself. And I realize I need to actually practice getting my needs met, advocating for my needs, communicating about my needs in order to progress into the next stage. Great. Write that down. Okay, so you don't have to have all the answers right now as you start this part of the course. We're reviewing this, and these are some of the questions you want to keep in mind and perhaps refer back to as you go through the course, so that you have this really clear awareness of what's governing you and what your dynamic is. Okay, so you can fill this out as you go. This doesn't have to be done in super chronological order. Okay, so this brings us to exercise number 2. And I'm going to start and I'm going to go through some of exercise number 2 with you guys here and ask some questions, things like this. And then we're going to return back to some of the Q&A in here as well. Okay. So exercise number 2, the dating phase. Okay. So this is all about journaling and brainstorming. And the purpose of this exercise is to make the subconscious contents of your mind conscious so you can get a clear picture of where you are and what you need to be working on. Okay. Now, this specifically for anxious preoccupied is a very important exercise to do. The reason for this is that anxious preoccupied individuals often spend a lot of time in the dating phase of their relationships people pleasing. And that's always going to be a recipe to be let down at some point if you start off on that foot in that phase of a relationship. We can be on our best behavior in a way, or we can try to be really connecting and present, and we can be on, be present and focused and want the date to go well and, be the best version of ourselves. But there's a difference between that and people pleasing, right? People pleasing is like denying your needs, denying your feelings, not speaking up about your opinions, not sharing what's important to you, not sharing what things bother you or upset you if they do, not speaking up about, what you want to eat for dinner, where you want to go on a date, not doing that. And all of those things are layer upon layer of you denying yourself. And all that can possibly happen when you're people pleasing in the dating phase of a relationship is somebody's going to, if they fall in love with you, fall in love with not you. Fall in love with this version of yourself that you've constructed. And all you're doing is you're making the power struggle phase of a relationship much more difficult when we reach that point. Okay? Because what often happens is if the AA people pleases in the dating phase, then you go into this honeymoon phase and you fall in love more with this ideal of somebody, this concept or this sort of image of somebody. And then part of the power struggle phase, even though it's a challenging part of the relationship, it's one of the most important parts of a relationship for really developing deeper love and to reaching a more unconditional state of love, because what it requires is for us as individuals to show our true selves. The neurochemicals that are all the feel-good neurochemicals when we fall in love, when we're in the honeymoon phase, we start to adapt to the person, we get used to them, and then that neurochemical high sort of normalizes again. And then you go into the next phase of a relationship, and this is your time to really get seen. This is your time to share your wounds if you haven't already. This is a time to, and we want to be doing this as early as possible and as much as possible so we make the power struggle phase much easier to navigate and move through. But it's a time for vulnerability. It's a time from going from I'm infatuated with this idea of a person to, oh my gosh, I really understand and see this person's inner world. I don't just project and imagine that they're like me and they suffer over the same things, or they get excited by the same things, or they have the same needs, or the same ways they give and receive love. No, I come to really deeply understand this person. I see them for their programming. I see them for who they are, their history, what their fears are, their wounds. And I come to love and appreciate and accept that, and vice versa. And so that's, we prepare ourselves for that by being as authentic as possible, as early as possible into dating, so that if we get into a relationship, the person is really seeing us and not this people-pleasing version of us, that then when we get to the power struggle phase and we're sick of people-pleasing and we start having all these other needs, or we start showing more of ourselves, that the person's not like, whoa, who is this? Where is this person coming from? And I'm not going to lie, I've seen a lot of marriages over the years where people got married in the honeymoon phase of a relationship, and both parties were very much people-pleasing early on, especially if it's like an FA and AA dynamic. And then I've heard stories of people go, they tricked me. I married them, and as soon as I married them, they became a monster. They became a totally different person. And what's happening is nobody's tricking anybody. Nobody's trying to reel someone in and lie and all these different things. I mean, obviously that can happen, but very rarely. What's usually happening is that both people are just so afraid to show themselves and to be themselves and to share their needs and to, be honest about who they are and share their vulnerabilities and potential weaknesses or imperfections. And then then they get married in the honeymoon phase if the relationship's moving a little bit quickly, and then all of a sudden the honeymoon phase is ended soon after the couple is married, And all of a sudden they're like, oh, we don't have to people please anymore. And they start sharing more, showing up more. And it seems to the other party like, whoa, where is this person coming from? So the whole point of this exercise, and what I really want you to focus in on here, is we want to remove ourselves as the anxious, preoccupied person. You want to remove yourself from playing the role where you go on a date or you get into the dating phase and you're going, how can I please this person? How can I, make them like me? How can I get their approval or attention or affection? How can I be on my best behavior? And you want to have this very rooted, equal space where you go, yeah, I want to, be connected and open and be the best version of myself when I'm dating and things like that. And that's a normal pattern of human behavior. This is very biological. Like, you look at different species of animals, this is what happens. But we have like peacocking and all these different things, right? But we want to be able to have that dynamic of ourselves, but really be honest and take ourselves into consideration and share who we are and share our needs and do that early and as early as possible. And so we want to have this mind frame where we're going, yes, I'll show up well, I'll make an effort, and I'm going to be also equally sitting and evaluating this person that I'm dating, because my time as a human being here on this planet is very precious, very meaningful. And I'm going to make sure that I'm giving that time to people who I feel like there's a mutual exchange, there's a mutual benefit. This person meets my needs. I'm not just finding the first or second person I date who I feel attracted to and think I have fun with and going, okay, now I have to do everything in my world to people please this person and get them to like me. No. We have to go on dates, go through the dating phase of a relationship and go, where is this, am I connecting to this person? And is this person fitting my needs and what I want and what I see myself having a relationship like and what my boundaries and my standards are as a person? And so I hope I'm not being too intense about this, but it's just so important for anxious, preoccupied. So you want to get clear. And this whole exercise is for you to get clear. What do you want in a relationship? What traits and qualities are important to you? Does this person you're dating fit those? How does this person make you feel when you're around them? And I ask that question for a very specific reason. Often people will get very involved in people pleasing who are anxious, preoccupied. So much so that it might be a subconscious comfort zone that they try to get a parent's attention growing up or something like this. And it feels like that's what love is. But when we really look in our adult lives, I actually don't feel good around this person. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells all the time. And we have to really get clear, is this person lifting us? Do we feel good? Do we have a good time? Do we feel safe? Do we feel connected? And so we have to have that checkpoint as an anxious, preoccupied, okay? And then in terms of personal empowerment, you can ask yourself, what do I need to become to be a match to those qualities that I desire? What patterns do I need to change? And it's going to be very easy for an anxious, preoccupied person to go into the mindset, I have to people please more. No, you are probably looking as the anxious, preoccupied person. Where do I need to express my needs more? Set boundaries more so that I can have a healthy dynamic and exchange. Speak up for myself more, evaluate somebody a little bit more thoroughly, check in with myself more often. These are going to be the things that you need to work on here. And that's why we say, what fears, wounds, or beliefs do I need to overcome for this stage to be more enjoyable? Okay, if there's anything outstanding there. And then we go through self-awareness and boundaries, checkpoints in terms of those questions. What judgments do I make about this person? What fears come up? For me, is there anything I'm ruminating about? And again, this is like a very big discovery portion of the workbook here to help you get clear on some of your patterns that do emerge during the dating phase, so you can clean them up and do the reprogramming work as quickly as possible. And the very last piece in here is the boundaries. Do you keep up with your healthy habits? Are you discarding other areas of your life? Part of being secure when you're coming from an anxious space is going to be, do I balance all 7 areas of my life? Or do I date somebody and throw everybody out the window? Start going into work late, start spending all my money on dates, start paying for expensive vacations when the other person's not contributing, stop spending time with my friends and family. Do I find that all these things that are meaningful to me, I throw out the window? And if you are doing that, that is a direct symptom of you giving up yourself. You are throwing out your sense of self. All of these different places and important areas of life that we have 7 of them. They're all very important. We want balance and harmony across all boards. And if we're throwing out our sense of self, then that is a symptom of us becoming very codependent. We're on track to have a really painful and challenging power struggle phase of a relationship. We're also on track for somebody to mirror those behaviors back to us at a subconscious level. And so also make us feel like we're thrown away or we're being discarded. And there's different reasons for that, but that I won't go into right now. Part of it is the way that we perceive it when we're hanging so much weight on somebody because we've thrown our sense of self away for them. And part of it is that biologically people can feel. And you remember your subconscious mind processes up to 1 billion bits of data per second versus your conscious mind's 40 to 60 bits of data per second. So we gain this major framework about a person that we're not necessarily consciously recognizing. And research has shown very conclusively that people tend to mirror behaviors that a person is enacting on the relationship to themselves. And so it's more likely that if somebody feels that, you know, you're honing in or closing in on them in a way where you're throwing out your sense of self and putting all your eggs in that basket, person's going to register that at a subconscious level and feel afraid with that degree of responsibility a lot of the time, and then try to, you know, return to homeostasis of a relationship dynamic by pushing you away to try to then get back into balance where we can both have our sense of self, because that's part of how we survive and that's part of what we need. And so when there's an imbalance there, the other person's going to be subconsciously trying to regulate that. So said I wouldn't get into those reasons, and then I did. But I want you guys to be clear on all these different dynamics, why they're so important to navigate and break through and do the work on. Okay, so I'm going to pause. I'm going to answer some questions, and then we're going to return to exercise 3. We're going to talk about some of the subconscious expectations and some of the different dynamics that are often at play here. So Dawn, hello Dawn, how are you today? Okay, so Dawn says, hey, Dawn here, FA with very AA, leaning with my DA guy. FA with very AA, leaning with my DA guy. I have a question. I'm having a lot of anxiety because I want to be with my guy all the time and he doesn't want to reciprocate. What do I need to work on to overcome this intense feeling of wanting to see him daily? Excellent. Okay. This is kind of what we were just talking about in a way, right? So what I want you to notice here is that a really important place you're going to start is going to be in making sure that you do 2 things. Number 1, meet my own needs, and really work to meet your needs on a regular basis, okay? So that you're not just relying on him to get all of those needs met, okay? Number 2, I would do a little checkpoint here, and I would go through all the 7 areas of my life, and I would ask myself, where have I become out of balance? And what do I need to do, or how do I need to show up to bring these things back into balance again? And this is going to be very important work to be doing, okay? So if I've been spending less time with friends or showing up differently at work, how do I correct those patterns and make sure that you're doing that? And what you're actually going to see is that the more you do that, the more time the other person's suddenly going to want to spend with you. The other thing is you can look for what you're in limerence regarding. There's some form of limerence there, like almost like an addictive pattern if we're feeling that drawn towards this person. So you can ask yourself, like, what in him am I so connected to? And if it's traits, then you want to look for where you have those same traits within yourself, okay? So that you're equilibrating some of this, like, I have him on such a pedestal dynamic. And if it is needs that he's meeting, you want to make sure you have other ways of getting those needs met in multiple forms so that you're not relying on that too much. And then I would ask myself too, like, what's a healthy amount of time to be spending together? Maybe in the early stage of a relationship, you could say, 3 days a week, 4 days a week would be really healthy. And I would actually try to stick to that as a means of trying to sort of force yourself in a way to take the time to carve out more balance throughout the other areas of your life. And if he doesn't want to hang out every single day, it doesn't mean he's not really interested. It doesn't mean he's not interested in the relationship. It actually just means he probably has less codependent patterns, which could actually be a long-term. I mean, I guess you said he's DA, but it's going to be important to find that middle ground and for you to become more interdependent by becoming more independent, and he's going to have to do the work to become more interdependent by becoming a little more dependent, instead of hyper independent, if that makes sense, or counter dependent. So that's going to be an important cycle for you guys to go through. But as you initiate, Dawn, doing that work first, you're going to see that he actually comes this way naturally, because this is part of this like dynamic and the way we harmonize with another person we're in a relationship with. So great question. Okay. So, Boonamigo, how are you today? So Boonamigo says, oh my God, Thais, double FA, double drama over here. We had the exclusivity talk. I agreed to cancel my online dating profile, and we even joked about marriage. Then she ended the conversation very abruptly. I texted her and told her I just needed to know everything was okay. She told me she can't do this anymore and not to contact her. And my God, I feel like she will run into me. Wow. But it still hurts so bad. I'm so confused. What is going on, and why the hot cold again? And telling myself she wanted to lock me in and then take back full control. What do you think? Yeah, sorry you're going through this. This is really tough. She sounds like she's very, very FA. And remember, we were saying this, was it yesterday we were talking about this? It's like another version of this in a way. We were saying how what often happens is when somebody is very FA, they start deactivating really hard around really large commitments. So, okay, we're talking about these more serious things, and it's like the agreement piece that really triggers FAs, because they can be connecting without all their wounds. But then the moment there's commitment towards exclusivity, towards a serious future, these different things, now there's things that can be broken. And now all the fears are going to come up, because it's like, okay, we're connecting, we're talking about the future. Oh my gosh, now all these fears are coming